heart of Paris, a city of lights and enlightenment, where for centuries, radical ideas have bloomed in cafes and lecture halls, spilled into the streets, and fomented paradigm shifts that laid the foundations of some of the decentralizing and democratizing movements on the planet. The Renaissance and the Enlightenment established many of the Western world's political, monetary, and scientific institutions. Each period was a major paradigm shift. We're living at the onset of another paradigm shift, one that will drive a transformation of how trust and authority operate on the planet.
I jumped into the Bitcoin space when I read the white paper by Satoshi Nakamoto. Vitalik Buterin explained Ethereum to me first day of 2014. I read the white paper on that day and I realized that Ethereum could be the technology that would enable the world to re-architect itself.
Ethereum is a decentralized blockchain upon which anyone in the world can build and use peer-to-peer apps and software. As the world's largest programmable blockchain, it's designed to be highly secure, energy efficient, and scalable. Ethereum uses a peer-to-peer network to execute and verify smart contracts. Smart contracts are what enable users to directly transact without the need for an intermediary, making completely new types of decentralized applications possible.
The nature of trust has been both valuable and problematic. For millennia, we've labored under top-down command and control trust systems where authorities would imbue intermediaries with trust and authority. And the intermediaries would essentially maintain ledgers indicating who owned what and who had what rights and privileges. And that system worked very well for the development of a society. In essence, it didn't work very well for the 99% of people who labored in that society.
Society today runs on networks. You have financial networks, you have social networks, you have trade networks. Networks are everywhere. And the problem with these networks is they're very exploitative.
Along comes Satoshi Nakamoto, recognizing the bankruptcy in trust on the planet, recognizing that people have lost trust in centralized institutions, recognizing that big technology has grown enormously exploitative.
You may not realize this, but when you use a social media platform, you're actually creating a lot of value with the information and the data that you generate. The problem is that this data, this information is being harvested by these platforms, these existing networks, and then it doesn't come back to you as a user, it goes to some big corporation. And this is an unfair deal.
But we have this new invention, the invention of decentralized trust, realized as blockchains. And so we can take this new invention of decentralized trust and use it to re-architect all the systems of the world. Ethereum can enable each of us to establish our own social graphs, to have the root of our identity, which we control, which we own. One can monetize their own social graph, unlike what meta platforms and Twitter and others enable you to do. For mainstream adoption, Ethereum needs to address certain challenges. Essentially, it is in its architectural design to overcome those challenges. We built Layer 1 to be as decentralizable as possible, but understood always that it wouldn't be very scalable in and of itself. And so the full architecture of the system involves moving computation into layers 2, layers 3, layers 4, etc., so that we can achieve as much transaction throughput, as much computation as the world requires. The democratization of Ethereum technology and The liberation of all the people on the planet can't happen until Ethereum is scalable. This is why we built Linea, to bring greater scalability, full internet scale scalability to Ethereum. Our R&D team at Consensus, specifically under Nicolas Liachon, recognized that zero-knowledge technology could be applied as a layer 2 rollup technology and proposed that we move in that direction. We did so as a speculative research project because we believed that the realization of the technology would be many years away, but our whole ecosystem and our Linea team in particular has made astonishing progress on the technology and has turned it into a real-world usable technology.
I basically started using computers in programmation when I was 10, when computers were very small, not powerful at all, and it was not very easy to do anything useful with them. So Linea is a ZK-EVM rollup. What does it mean? It means that it's based on Ethereum, and we are making it possible to be much cheaper on the long term. The idea is today on Ethereum, there are some limitations on the capacity, which makes the transactions very expensive. And by being able to scale, the transactions become much less expensive, and they will remain less expensive because it's a scalable solution. And we do it in the most secure way. That's the idea of the ZK part, when you have some zero-knowledge cryptography, some fancy mathematics all over the place. But the main result of this is it's the most secure way to execute transactions. So that's what is Linea. It scales, it's Ethereum, and it's secure.
Zero-knowledge proofs are a cryptographic method used for data verification. The Ethereum virtual machine is a decentralized computation engine that executes smart contracts on the Ethereum network. Together, they form a zero-knowledge rollup, which is a layer 2 scaling solution that increases transaction throughput while lowering costs for Ethereum users.
So, what is very interesting about the ZK-EVM and what is complicated is the different knowledges that it requires. If you want to build a ZK-EVM, you need to do something that is called the arithmetization, and to do a good arithmetization, it's basically mathematics. You don't need cryptography, you don't need computer science, you need mathematics. It's really organizing what is called a system of constraints, and it's all about mathematics.
I don't know when I really started falling in love with mathematics, and I'm no longer a mathematician nowadays, but what I do retain is the sort of mindset of going into stuff and going to the end of it and sort of trying to understand the inner workings. When we actually started thinking about seriously doing a ZK-EVM, my initial point of view was this was a lost endeavor and that we would never be able to actually achieve anything of that sort because just the tool set was not ready for it.
It's very complicated if you look at it globally. Like, I mean, just the mathematical part of the ZK rollup is incredibly complex and very advanced. But the huge advantage of this is the complexity is hidden. From a user point of view, you don't see at all the cryptography, the mathematical part of it. You're basically sending transactions like you would be doing on Ethereum, and it's secure and scales, but all the complexity is hidden. We are the one managing it, but from a user point of view, everything is simple. So that's why we thought that those rollups were the best possible solution, just a little bit complicated to make it work. That's why it took us all those years.
I joined Consensus 6 years ago. It was actually my first job. Linea's prover is a component made of research. It's a piece of software, and it's also a server that is running in production today. The prover is using lattice-based cryptography and and we developed a custom protocol to make our ZK-EVM more efficient.
Linea's prover is a core element of its software architecture, responsible for generating proofs and ensuring that the transactions submitted on Linea are executed correctly. Proofs are cryptographic objects that validate transaction executions and take milliseconds to verify. Linea's prover encodes the Ethereum virtual machine into a mathematical equation, solved by providing a valid trace of a transaction execution. Once a block of transactions has been encoded, the prover then uses Vortex, a cryptographic protocol, to generate a proof in order to approve the transaction execution on Linea.
The purpose of Linea's prover is to receive a batch of transactions with some traces and generate a proof that these transactions have been correctly executed and yield the corresponding state transition on Linea.
As we sort of made progress and sort of understood that we could break up the complexity of the Ethereum virtual machine into many sort of independent parts that we could make communicate with standard cryptographic protocols, when we sort of realized that we could break the complexity into many chunks, that the chunks could communicate with one another, and that we could embed something that was much more flexible than what we'd previously done into these modules, it became a question of engineering and design.
I joined in September 2020. I was basically working on productizing an R&D product and building that into an actual engineering product. We started with partially anonymous payments. Once this was shipped, we focused on ZK-EVM, which happened to become Linea.
I joined to kind of product lead the consensus rollups team at the time. Julian Marchand was there as the engineering lead, and we were sort of working on a contract with a permission network to build sort of privacy consortium chains. And we sort of looked around and said, is this the most impactful thing we could be doing, both for consensus, but also for Ethereum and Web3? And so we kind of set on this discovery process to look and see what other things could be better to achieve. And that's when we spoke to Nicolas Learchon and the consensus R&D team. They were working on the ZK-EVM, and we sort of said to ourselves that there's a real need at the moment for a public ZK-EVM network. Is it worth it for us to actually launch a testnet and see if this is something that makes sense for the greater Ethereum ecosystem? At the end of 2022, we launched a public testnet. It was a closed testnet. We put a waitlist up for people to sign up to actually join. We had so many people sign up in the first few months that it broke the waitlist. It was extremely popular, and everyone was feeling very, happy and excited about the idea of consensus launching a ZK-EVM.
There were sort of several points in time where the level of confidence shot up dramatically. When we went from, okay, this is maybe doable, but I don't believe it, to actually, yes, it is doable. Yes, we will do it. It's going to be amazing. And it was going to be an immense amount of fun and tremendously rewarding work.
It was then around March 2023 that we decided to open up the testnet to the public. That was also when we rebranded the consensus ZK-EVM to Linea. It was actually at the ETH Denver event 2023 that we did that. That launch was super successful. We had lots of partners keen to sign up, and we spent the next few months just onboarding many different partners, many different applications, many different protocols.
It was like a drug trip that lasted for like 4 months or something. And where I went from despair, where I thought the project would die, to actually building our first implementation of memory, RAM, this kind of stuff, that I fully understood and that was flexible enough to do exactly what we wanted. This process lasted months, and it was a period of time where, even though I'm not a morning person, I would wake up ready to go basically at 7 a.m. every day without any alarm, and would have the stamina to work for entire days until midnight or 1 a.m. or this kind of stuff, and just making progress and just stumbling upon all of these issues that kept on arising.
After we launched public mainnet, I remember being in Paris and we all went for dinner, and we're sort of looking on our phones and we could see that the TVL of Linea had hit, $1 million, $2 million. And we all sort of sat there looking at each other thinking, wow, this is amazing. Like, we've launched a public mainnet. People are actually, putting faith and putting their assets onto the chain. But there's also this sense of like, this is really just the beginning. And the numbers just rose from there. We saw even more users than previously with the DeFi voyage. We saw even more transactions. And the TVL, which is the total value locked, and gives you a sense of the financial security or the financial investment into the chain, that just went up and to the right. But it was a huge milestone for Linea. It actually accelerated Linea to be the premier ZK chain.
I think the most challenging part of building Linea from the engineering point of view has been to manage the Quest specifically workload. They have been pretty intense because everyone wanted to participate and have a piece of the cake. So basically activity was multiplied almost by 10. If you're looking at before, like when we just started mainnet and like during peaks of activity, we reached 60, 70 TPS for multiple days. We've got like tens of thousands of requests per second hitting the infrastructure, so it's putting a lot of pressure everywhere on the infrastructure, and you need to cope with the load because nothing is going to stop users from sending transactions.
And so what we're trying to achieve with Linea is essentially to build better networks, to replace the networks of Web 2, the status quo, with the more value-giving networks of Web 3.
So what do we have left on the decentralization topics?
I guess from the point of view of the arithmetization, the big thing that is a blocker towards, or something that is required almost to get to decentralization, is basically formal verification and the confidence you get from a formally verified system. If you're going to open it to the entirety of the world to produce proofs, etc., you'd rather, well, you had better make sure that the proof system is airtight and that the constraints basically exactly capture the execution of the EVM.
How do we manage the link with between arithmetization and prover? Can we optimize this?
It would be great if we could, probably a more long-standing problem. If we could have a formal verification of the arithmetization plus the prover together, that would be amazing if we could do it.
Step 1 of the decentralization roadmap is to open source all the software. The other part is to make sure that the prover is complete. Second step of Linea is to diversify the Security Council. The Security Council is a group of people who can essentially determine the upgrade path for Linea mainnet. Stage 3 is all about decentralizing the operations and decentralizing the governance. So the operations of Linea mainnet consist of a sequencer, which builds blocks, and a prover, which generates proofs. And we want to decentralize both of those parts so there isn't a single point of failure. But we also want to decentralize the governance. Who can control and decide what happens to the Linea protocol and the Linea ecosystem? Phase 4 is all about establishing what we call the multi-prover. Today, Linea has a single prover. We generate zero-knowledge proofs and verify them on Ethereum. With the multi-prover, we're essentially adding another layer, another prover. And this just gives us an extra layer of security and redundancy that helps Linea to be a fully secure and trust-minimized network. And the last part is really to limit the powers of governance. So with rollups, we have this governance system, but it's really important to make sure that what's able to be governed is as minimal as possible.
What makes Ethereum such an achievement is that it took the underlying ideas of Bitcoin that allowed to have a totally unsupervised, decentralized consensus mechanism for value on the internet and upgraded it from something that is able to process a certain type of operation, which is a very narrow kind of operation, basically value transfers, to be a general purpose, Turing-complete machine that can process any kind of application.
The endgame of Ethereum is widespread adoption in the sense that payment can be done directly on Ethereum. There is no reason to use anything else. Also, it would also have more application. I'm thinking, for instance, of electronic voting on blockchain would be so amazing. We could use it to notarize, for instance, diplomas. There are applications in blockchain to notarize diploma or real estate, and we could use Ethereum to its full potential.
Ethereum is necessary for society because a lot of our interactions are based on trust, which is great when it works, when it's not abused by various means, and when it's possible. And there are many cases where the trust is not possible, so some interactions, some contracts, some things cannot happen because the trust is not established, and Ethereum makes this possible.
So we need to challenge the status quo of how people and communities interact and operate in traditional society and on the internet. We need a paradigm shift similar to how the French and American revolutions affected a paradigm shift.
Yeah, there are some interesting links that we can make between the Ethereum revolution and the French Revolution. And a big thing is the French Revolution was actually to be about human rights for everybody. It was not for a few, it was really for everybody. And it's something that we really find in the Ethereum culture as well. We're not building something for some happy fews, for some specialists. It's really built for everyone.
So scaling Ethereum matters because Ethereum, from my point of view, is a common good. And it should be something that is available to everybody, be it at the very base level as a settlement layer or for people to directly interact with it. If the ambition is to be a global settlement layer, you need high throughput. You need to be able to handle the world's computation.
My hope for the future of Linea is that people will use it without even knowing they're using it. And what I mean by that is when you interact with the internet today, with Web 2, you don't really understand the underlying infrastructure that you're using. It's very like running the tap. People get a glass of water, but they don't need to understand how a sewage system works. They just get water and it benefits their lives.
On Ethereum, on Linea, on social graphs, we're going to see a re-architecting of how business, hobbies, social life is built in the decentralized future.